Malik Johnson stepped out of the boardroom, his polished loafers catching on the edge of the carpet as a sudden wave of dizziness swept through him. The sleek mahogany table behind him blurred, the panoramic skyline of Atlanta outside the tall, windows swimming in and out of focus. He gripped the doorframe, his knuckles turning white, while his assistant Keisha rushed to his side and asked with concern if he was okay. Malik waved her off, forcing a tight smile, telling her he just needed some air. But inside he knew the truth was uglier. This wasn't the first time. For weeks these episodes had haunted him, his chest tightening, his head clouding, his world tilting like a ship in a storm. He had brushed them off as stress, the endless weight of running a hotel empire. But they were getting worse, not better. He ordered Keisha to call Dr. Thompson, his voice low and sharp because he didn't want the board members catching any hint of weakness. To them he had to remain invincible, and billionaires like Malik Johnson could not afford fragility. Keisha nodded and was already dialing as Malik steadied himself and walked to the elevator. His reflection in the mirrored doors showed a man the world believed to be untouchable. Tailored navy suit, sharp jawline, deep brown skin glowing under the lights, eyes that commanded respect. But inside he felt like a clock winding down. The private hospital in Atlanta was a fortress of glass and steel, its quiet corridors reserved for the city's elite. Malik had been there 3 months ago when the dizzy spells first began. Back then Dr. Thompson had run tests, prescribed rest, and sent him home with vague reassurances. Probably just exhaustion, the doctor had said in a tone too casual for Malik's liking. But today, as Malik sat on the edge of a leather chair in the consultation room, the air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. The faint hum of medical equipment buzzed around him like a warning. Dr. Thompson entered, his face calm and professional but his eyes uneasy. He held a tablet, swiping through charts, before finally speaking. He told Malik the scans had confirmed a degenerative condition affecting his nervous system. Rare, aggressive, with no cure. He told him he had 3 years, maybe less. The words struck Malik like a punch. His breath caught and his mind spun, trying to process the impossible. He was only 38 in his prime, feared and respected in equal measure. He had built hotels that stretched across continents, made his name synonymous with power, yet now he was reduced to a ticking clock. Malik asked if he was certain. Dr. Thompson nodded, explaining that the dizziness, the fatigue, the spells all pointed to the same conclusion. They could try to slow the progression, but nothing could stop it. Malik leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his mind a storm of fear and regret. He had always believed he had more time to expand, to outmaneuver rivals, to live. But what cut deeper than his own mortality was the thought of his legacy. He had no heir, no child to carry his name, no family to inherit the empire he had fought for. A vision of his half-brother Darius flashed in his mind. Reckless, charming, and selfish, Darius was the kind of man who would squander everything on cheap deals and cheaper women. The thought of him inheriting it all made Malik's jaw clench. Malik snapped back to the present and demanded options. Dr. Thompson mentioned medication, therapy, ways to manage the symptoms, but urged him to think about his priorities. Malik's gaze drifted to the Atlanta skyline gleaming under the afternoon sun. What mattered most? He had spent his life chasing wealth, control, and dominance, but now, facing the end, he saw the hole in his world. No family, no child, no one to carry the Johnson name. I need an heir, Malik said to himself, his voice heavy with resolve. Dr. Thompson warned that it was a major decision, one that required trust and compatibility, but Malik cut him off and said he would handle it. He rose from his chair, smoothing his suit and masking the tremor in his hands. He thanked the doctor, demanded discretion, and left the room, his mind already spinning with plans. He would find someone to bear his child, someone to secure his legacy before time ran out. That night at his penthouse overlooking the city lights of Atlanta, Malik stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass of whiskey untouched, in his hand. The streets below pulsed with life, but he felt disconnected, isolated. Dr. Thompson's words echoed in his head like a curse. 3 years. His life, his empire, suddenly fragile. He lowered himself into a leather chair, his thoughts drifting to his past. His father's death when Malik was a teenager, Darius's betrayal when he tried to sabotage his first hotel deal, the years of fighting alone. Family had always been a battlefield, but now the idea of creating one consumed him. He didn't just want an heir. He wanted meaning, someone who would outlast him. His phone buzzed. It was Keisha checking in, asking if he needed anything. Malik lied and told her he was fine, instructing her to cancel tomorrow's meetings because he needed time. He hung up before she could respond. Time. The word mocked him. For years he had built an empire deal by deal, brick by brick, but what was it worth if it vanished with him? On his desk sat a framed photo of him and his mother on a beach when he was 10, a rare moment of joy that reminded him of what he had lost. His chest tightened as he whispered to himself that he would find someone strong, someone worthy, and he would do it on his own terms. Another buzz came from Keisha, reminding him about the charity gala at the Regal Crown Hotel, one of his own properties. He had almost canceled, but the thought of sitting alone with his thoughts seemed worse than plastering on a smile for Atlanta's elite. He needed a distraction, maybe even a spark. By the time Malik adjusted his tie and walked into the glittering ballroom of the Regal Crown, he already felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him. He wasn't just searching for company. He was searching for a future. And somewhere in that room, fate was waiting to meet him. The ballroom of the Regal Crown Hotel glowed with golden chandeliers, polished floors reflecting the swirl of gowns and tuxedos. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air as Atlanta's elite gathered to celebrate another charity fundraiser, the kind of event where power moved quietly in whispers and handshakes. Malik Johnson entered, his broad shoulders straight, his commanding presence turning heads the moment he stepped into the room. To the crowd, he looked as untouchable as ever, the billionaire whose empire stretched across continents. But inside his chest, the words of Dr. Thompson echoed like a curse. 3 years, maybe less. He tightened his jaw and forced himself forward. He greeted familiar faces, politicians, investors, socialites, all of whom smiled too brightly, spoke too quickly, always calculating what they could gain from his attention. Malik's mind was elsewhere, his focus broken, until a sudden crash split through the chatter. A tray of wine glasses shattered on the floor, the sharp sound silencing the crowd for a moment. Red wine splashed across his crisp white shirt. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. A young woman froze where she stood, her cheeks flushed, her apron twisted as she knelt to gather the glass. Her dark brown skin glowed under the lights, her thick black curls pulled into a loose bun that struggled to hold them back. Her hazel brown eyes widened in panic. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she stammered, her hands shaking as she picked up shards. "I didn't see you. I was turning too quickly." Malik crouched down beside her, his movements calm and steady. The crowd leaned in, expecting the billionaire to snap, to demand she be fired on the spot, but instead Malik handed her a napkin and gave her a small smile. "It's just a shirt," he said lightly, his voice rich but relaxed. Their fingers brushed for a brief moment, a spark jumping between them, unexpected and disarming. She blinked up at him, torn between embarrassment and defiance. "You're not mad? Most men in your position would be calling my manager right now." A deep chuckle rumbled from Malik's chest, a sound so genuine it surprised even him. "Most men in my position don't know how to laugh at themselves," he replied as he stood and extended his hand to her. "What's your name?" She hesitated before slipping her hand into his. Her grip was firm, her palm rough from long shifts. "Amara Davis," she said. Malik repeated it softly, as though tasting something rare and precious. "Amara, forget the shirt. Keep the glasses off the floor and we're even." Amara nodded, her eyes holding a spark of gratitude but also caution. She rose quickly, brushed her apron with nervous hands, and hurried back toward the kitchen, leaving Malik watching her with something he hadn't felt in years. Not attraction alone, something deeper, something alive. The crowd resumed its chatter, but Malik barely noticed. His mind replayed the moment, her honesty, the firmness in her voice, the way she hadn't groveled like so many others in the room. She was different, raw and unpolished, a flame in a world of masks. As he retreated to a quieter corner, his assistant Keisha approached with a spare jacket, but Malik waved her off. "She's fine, leave it," he said firmly when Keisha asked if he wanted the waitress dismissed. His eyes followed Amara as she moved across the ballroom carrying another tray, steady and composed, her earlier panic already hidden behind a professional calm. She balanced dishes, dodged guests, focused on her work with a quiet grace. Malik's mind churned. He had been thinking of contracts, surrogates, clinical arrangements, something cold and transactional to secure his legacy. But now his thoughts shifted. Amara was a possibility he hadn't considered, not just because she could give him an heir, but because of the way she made him feel alive again, even if only for a moment. Just then a familiar voice sliced through the air. "Heard you had a little wine bath, brother." Darius Johnson, Malik's half-brother, strolled over with a smirk tugging at his lips. His suit was flashy, his hair slicked back too perfectly, his presence always just loud enough to command attention. Malik's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Darius?" Malik asked coldly. "Just checking on my favorite sibling," Darius replied, his tone dripping with mock concern. "You look pale. Rough night?" His eyes flicked toward Amara, who was clearing a table nearby. "She's cute but ordinary, not exactly your type. You usually go for polished women, not diner girls with calloused hands." Malik's gaze followed his brother's, his protective instincts flaring as heat surged through him. His voice dropped low, dangerous. "Stay out of it." Darius laughed, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Touchy tonight. Relax. Just making conversation." He slipped back into the crowd, but his smirk lingered in Malik's mind like a stain. Across the room, Amara laughed softly at something another waitress said, her face lighting up with warmth. Malik's chest ached at the sight. He didn't know her story, but he wanted to. He needed to. She was more than a distraction. She was a spark. By the time the event ended, Malik had already made a decision. He would see her again. Not tonight. Not in front of the eyes of Atlanta's wealthy, but soon. Amara Davis wasn't just an accident. She was the beginning of something he hadn't even realized he was searching for. By the next morning, Malik sat in his penthouse office, a sleek space of glass and steel overlooking Atlanta's waterfront. The city stretched out beneath him, busy and alive, but his focus was fixed on the slim folder lying on his desk. His private investigator, a discreet man named Paul, had worked overnight to find everything there was to know about Amara Davis. Malik traced his finger slowly over her name on the first page. Amara Davis, 26, orphaned at 19, raising her 16-year-old sister Nia in a cramped apartment on the east side of Atlanta. She worked double shifts at Mama D's diner and picked up catering jobs like last night's gala to keep them afloat. No criminal record, no scandals. Just grit, determination, and sacrifice. Paul's notes described her as hardworking, honorable, and proud. Malik leaned back in his chair, his green eyes narrowing in thought. She wasn't just perfect for an heir, she was perfect for him. Later that afternoon, he found her exactly where the file said she would be, behind the counter at Mama D's diner. The little place smelled of coffee and grease, its chipped formica tables filled with regulars who had known each other for years. Amara moved between tables with grace, balancing plates and a smile for an elderly customer. Malik paused at the door, his broad frame filling the entrance as he adjusted his tie, a rare flicker of nerves sparking in his chest. Then he stepped inside, his presence instantly drawing curious glances from the patrons. "Amara," he said, his deep voice cutting through the hum of conversation. She turned, her hazel brown eyes widening with shock, then narrowing with suspicion. "You again," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "If you're here about the shirt, I told you I'd pay for it." "It's not about the shirt," Malik replied calmly, as he slid onto a stool at the counter, ignoring the whispers around him. Can we talk somewhere private? Amara glanced at the clock. My break's in 10 minutes. You buying coffee or just taking up space? Coffee. Black, he said with a faint smirk. 10 minutes later, they sat together in a quiet corner booth. The low buzz of the diner faded around them as Malik leaned forward, his eyes locked onto hers with a steady intensity that made her shift in her seat. So what is this really about? She asked, sipping water, her posture guarded. You don't look like the type who eats at diners. I looked into you, Malik said, his voice low and deliberate. I know about your sister. I know about your parents. I know about the double shifts. You're fighting to survive. Amara's face hardened, her eyes flashing with anger. You had no right to dig into my life. What do you want from me, Johnson? I want to make you an offer, Malik replied, his tone steady even though his heart pounded in his chest. Marry me, give me a child. In return, I'll secure your future and your sister's. Nia will have her college paid for. You'll have a home, stability, everything you need. The glass in Amara's hand stilled. The words hung heavy between them, almost surreal. You're serious, she whispered, her voice tight. You're actually serious? I don't joke about things like this, Malik said, his gaze unwavering. I'm running out of time, Amara. I need someone I can trust, someone real. That's you. She let out a sharp laugh, disbelief dripping from every word. You don't even know me. I spilled wine on you, and now you want me to be your wife, to have your child. This isn't a fairy tale, Malik. This is insane. Maybe it is, he admitted, leaning closer, his voice dropping. But you're drowning. I see it in your eyes, the weight you carry every single day. I can change that. You give me an heir, and I give you freedom. Nia gets a future. Both of you do. Amara's hands trembled as she set her glass down with a thud. You think you can just buy me? I'm not some transaction. That's not what this is, Malik said, his tone softening for the first time. I saw you last night, your fire, your honesty. You're not like anyone else I've ever met. I don't just want an heir. I want you. Her breath caught, and for a moment her eyes locked with his. The air between them thickened, alive with something neither of them wanted to name. She looked away quickly, twisting a napkin in her hands. You don't know what you're asking. I have Nia to think about. She's all I have. I know, Malik said quietly. That's why I'm offering this. For her. For you. I'm not asking for love, Amara. I'm asking for a partnership, but don't lie to yourself. You felt it last night the same way I did. Her cheeks flushed, and she didn't deny it. The memory of their brief touch lingered in her mind. The way his smile had shaken her defenses. She stood abruptly, pacing a step away. This is crazy. I can't just say yes to this. I need time. Take it, Malik said as he stood too, towering but not overbearing. But don't take too long. I'll be at the Regal Crown tomorrow, night at 8. Meet me there if you're in. Amara stared at him, torn between fear, temptation, and something deeper she couldn't yet name. And if I say no? She asked softly. Then you say no, he replied, his voice low, almost tender. But I don't think you will. He left her standing in the diner, the bell above the door jingling as he stepped into the Atlanta sunlight. Amara sank into the booth, her pulse racing. His offer was madness, but the thought of Nia's future, of college, of security, was a lifeline she couldn't ignore. And then there was Malik himself, with his intensity and his unexpected warmth. She had felt it too, that pull that scared her as much as it thrilled her. As her shift dragged on, the weight of his words stayed with her. Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, the Regal Crown Hotel, a decision that could change everything. The following evening, Amara sat on the edge of her bed in their small East Side apartment, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror above, the dresser. Nia was in the living room, headphones on, finishing her homework. Amara's hands trembled as she smoothed her simple black dress, her mind a storm of doubt and temptation. Malik Johnson's offer replayed in her head over and over, every word heavy with risk and promise. He wanted her to marry him, he wanted her to give him a child. And in return, he would give her everything she had spent years fighting to provide for Nia. She rose, slipped on her shoes, and whispered to herself that she was doing this for her sister, for Nia's future, for stability. She wasn't walking into a romance. She was walking into a deal. By the time she arrived at the Regal Crown, her chest was tight with nerves. The hotel's ballroom was quieter that night, its chandeliers dimmed, the air heavy with anticipation rather than celebration. Malik stood near the grand piano, dressed in a tailored black suit that emphasized his broad frame and commanding presence. His green eyes sharpened the moment they locked on her. "You came," he said simply, his voice carrying both relief and certainty. Amara lifted her chin, steadying her voice. "I came to hear you out one more time. I haven't decided anything yet." Malik stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. "Then let me be clear. I can give you and Nia a home, financial security, and a future. You give me an heir and stand beside me, that's all I ask, no games, no lies." Amara studied him, her heart pounding. His confidence was intimidating, but beneath it she saw a flicker of vulnerability. A man carrying the weight of time he believed he didn't have. "And what if I agree?" "What happens then?" she asked. "Then, we make it official," Malik said without hesitation. "We don't wait months, we don't wait years, we marry quickly before anyone can interfere." Her breath caught. "Quickly? You mean within weeks?" "Yes," he answered firmly. "I don't have the luxury of waiting, Amara." She glanced away, her thoughts racing. She wanted to run. She wanted to refuse. But when she thought of Nia sitting in that small apartment, wearing hand-me-down clothes, worrying about tuition she might never afford, Amara felt the weight of her reality crush her hesitation. She turned back to Malik, her voice quiet but steady. "If I do this, it's not for you. It's for my sister. She comes first." Malik nodded once. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Silence stretched between them, thick and charged. Then Amara whispered the words that sealed her choice. "All right, I'll do it." A rare smile broke across Malik's face, raw and unguarded, a flash of joy that made him look younger for a moment. He reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "You won't regret this." Amara's heart skipped as his thumb brushed her skin, the contact sending a jolt she wasn't prepared for. She pulled her hand back quickly, needing distance. "Don't mistake this for love," she warned. "This is an arrangement." Malik's smile faded, replaced by the sharp edge of determination. "An arrangement, yes, but one built on trust. And maybe more." Within weeks, the whirlwind consumed them both. Contracts were drafted, lawyers met behind closed doors, details were finalized with ruthless efficiency. By the third week, Amara found herself standing in a small but elegant chapel on the outskirts of Atlanta, her simple ivory dress clinging awkwardly to her nervous frame. She barely recognized the woman in the mirror as she adjusted the veil. No apron, no diner uniform, just a bride about to marry a billionaire. The pews were filled with only a handful of Malik's business associates and a few of Amara's co-workers who had come to support her. Nia sat in the front row, her eyes wide with awe and worry, her new dress a gift from Malik. Amara's heart ached as she looked at her, reminding herself why she had agreed to this. At the altar, Malik waited, his black suit perfectly fitted, his stance steady and commanding. His eyes locked on hers the moment she stepped into the chapel. For a heartbeat, Amara felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from the weight of his gaze. His hand reached for hers as she stood beside him, grounding her even as the words of the officiant blurred into background noise. Darius leaned against the back pew, his smirk cutting through the ceremony like a blade. Amara felt his eyes on her, sharp and mocking, already spreading whispers of gold digger among the guests. Malik's grip on her hand tightened, a quiet promise of protection. When the vows were spoken, and the officiant declared them husband and wife, Malik leaned in and brushed his lips against hers in a restrained kiss. The spark that passed between them was real, unexpected, and it left Amara breathless even as Damien's slow, sarcastic applause echoed from the back. At the reception afterward, held in a private room of the Regal Crown, Amara clutched her champagne, flute, her nerves frayed by the stares of wealthy guests who watched her like a curiosity. Malik stayed close, his hand resting lightly at her waist, his jaw tense as if daring anyone to question her place at his side. But when he finally leaned down to speak, his words were colder than she expected. "This is a deal, Amara, nothing more. Don't expect hearts and flowers." Her chest tightened, but she refused to flinch. "I don't," she shot back in a low voice. "I'm here for Nia, the same way you're here for your legacy. Let's not pretend otherwise." For a moment, his eyes softened, the edge of respect glinting there before he turned to greet another guest. Amara sipped her champagne, her mind spinning with the contradiction of the man beside her. He could be cold and guarded, yet when he looked at her in rare moments she felt seen in ways she never had before. And when his half-brother approached with his oily smile, calling her Mrs. Johnson as though the words were a joke, Amara met his taunt head-on. "I'm ready for whatever comes," she told Darius sharply, her voice carrying a strength that silenced his smirk for the first time. Malik returned to her side, his presence a shield, his hand firm at her waist. "Find someone else to bother, Darius," he warned. His brother only raised his glass, but the venom in his eyes made Amara shiver. As the night wound down and Malik led her toward the balcony, the cool air washed over her. She admitted softly that it was a lot to take in, that his words about their marriage being only a deal didn't match the way he sometimes looked at her. Malik didn't answer, but when he took her hand in his thumb brushing her knuckles, Amara felt a flicker of truth she wasn't ready to face. The night ended with the two of them in his penthouse, the city lights stretching beyond the glass walls. Malik told her to rest, but when he stumbled, his body trembling with another dizzy spell, Amara rushed to his side without hesitation. For the first time she saw him vulnerable. For the first time she touched him not as a billionaire or a husband by contract, but as a man. And for the first time, Malik allowed it. The penthouse was quiet. The only sound the hum of the city lights filtering through the glass walls. Amara steadied Malik as he gripped the counter, his hand trembling, his breath unsteady. She guided him to the sofa, her voice firm but gentle, telling him to sit down and let the spell pass. His jaw was clenched, his green eyes clouded with pain, and for the first time she saw not the untouchable billionaire but a man weighed down by something he could not control. "It's one of those spells, isn't it?" she asked, kneeling beside him. He nodded stiffly, muttering that it would pass. But when his hand shook as he tried to lift the glass of water, she took it and held it to his lips. He drank slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, and in that moment, the room seemed smaller, the air heavier. "You don't have to hide it from me," Amara said softly, her hand steady on his knee. "Deal or no deal, I'm here." Malik's breath caught. Something in his gaze shifted, raw and unguarded, as if he were seeing daylight for the first time after years in the dark. "You don't know what you're saying," he whispered, almost as a warning, but he didn't move away. Amara's heart pounded, her own words surprising her as they slipped out. "I know enough. You're not just a billionaire, Malik, you're human." The word broke something inside him. He reached for her, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. "Amara," he murmured, her name a confession. His lips met hers in a kiss that was nothing like the restrained one at the wedding. It was hungry, desperate, searching. Amara leaned into it, her hands sliding to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. The kiss deepened, fire sparking, between them consuming the walls he had built. Malik pulled her closer, lifting her onto his lap, his hands gripping her waist as though he was afraid to let go. She gasped against his lips, her fingers tangling in his hair as his mouth trailed to her neck. His low groan vibrated against her skin. "I shouldn't want this," he whispered, his voice ragged. "I shouldn't want you." "But you do," she whispered back, her voice trembling with both fear and desire. "And I want you too." the last of their restraint shattered. Malik stood, carrying her effortlessly into the bedroom as their mouths remained locked together. The city lights bathed them in a soft silver glow as he laid her down on the bed. Their movements were urgent but tender, a rhythm of need and vulnerability colliding. Her dress fell away, his shirt followed, and their skin pressed together in a rush of heat. Every touch was discovery. His hands mapped her curves with reverence, her body arching under his as if she had always belonged there. Their breaths mingled, their whispers filling the room. Malik's voice was raw as he murmured that she was more than he deserved, his eyes locking onto hers with intensity that made her heart ache. For Amara, it wasn't just desire. It was the terrifying realization that she wanted more than a contract. She wanted him, the man behind the mask, the one who carried pain and strength in equal measure. Hours later, they lay tangled in the sheets, their bodies still humming from the fire they had unleashed. Malik's arm curled protectively around her as his fingers traced gentle patterns along her back. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly, though there was no coldness in his tone. "Maybe it was," Amara whispered back, her cheek pressed against his chest. "Maybe we're more than a deal." He didn't answer, but the way his grip tightened spoke volumes. Amara closed her eyes, torn between hope and fear. Was this the beginning of something real, or only a fleeting escape from the truth that haunted him? When morning came, the sunlight streamed into the room. Amara stirred and found the bed empty, the warmth beside her gone. Malik stood by the window, coffee mug in hand, his gaze fixed on the city below. His posture was rigid, his face guarded, once more, as though the intimacy of the night before had been locked away. "Morning," she said softly, pulling his shirt around her shoulders. He turned, his expression softening for just a second before hardening again. "We should talk about logistics," he said in a clipped, businesslike tone. "The doctor's visit is tomorrow. We need to confirm progress." The words cut like ice so far from the warmth of his touch the night before. Amara's stomach twisted, doubt gnawing at her. Was he retreating to protect himself, or had she misread everything? Before she could ask, a knock sounded at the door and Keisha entered, tablet in hand. She announced that Malik's mother, Evelyn Johnson, was in town and wanted lunch with them, and that Darius had been calling non-stop about the wedding. Malik's jaw tightened. "Tell Darius to stay out of my business, and set up the lunch with my mother 1 o'clock. Amara's heart sank. She had seen Evelyn's picture before in the file Paul had given Malik. Sharp cheekbones, sharper eyes, a woman who ruled her world with an iron fist. Facing her felt like stepping into a lion's den. And Amara knew, as Malik turned back toward the window, that her trials in this new life were only just beginning. The restaurant Evelyn Johnson had chosen for lunch was one of Atlanta's most exclusive, its white tablecloths and crystal glasses gleaming under the midday sun. The space overlooked the harbor, the skyline glittering in the distance. Amara entered on Malik's arm, her nerves twisting tighter with every step. This was Evelyn's territory, a world of power and judgment, and Amara felt like an intruder the moment they walked through the door. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her silver hair immaculately styled, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Beside her lounged Darius, sipping whiskey even before lunch, his smirk firmly in place. Malik's hand rested lightly on Amara's knee under the table, a quiet reassurance, but his face remained a mask of control. "Grace, is it?" Evelyn said smoothly, her voice polite but dripping with condescension. "No, it's Amara," Malik corrected sharply, his tone protective, but Evelyn's smile didn't falter. "Amara. Well, you've certainly moved quickly. From waitress to Mrs. Johnson in less than a month." Amara's cheeks heated, but she held Evelyn's gaze. "I'm here for Malik," she said steadily. "Not for a title." Darius gave a low laugh, swirling the ice in his glass. "Come on, Amara. You expect us to believe you're not in this for the money? Malik has a clock ticking over his head, and somehow you appear at the perfect time. Convenient, isn't it?" Malik's Hand tightened on her knee, his jaw flexing as he hissed at his brother to stop. But Darius leaned closer, his words low and poisonous. "You're just a means to an end, sweetheart. Malik's using you for his heir. You think he cares? I could give you a better life, real attention, not a contract." Amara's blood boiled. She leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to draw the attention of nearby tables. "I'd rather scrape by at the diner than take anything from you. You're not half the man Malik is." Darius's smile faltered for the first time, but Evelyn's laugh cut through, cold and sharp. "Oh dear. Spirited, aren't you? But you're out of your depth. Malik's world will chew you up and spit you out. A diner girl trying to survive in our circles? It's almost comical." The restaurant seemed to hush, every nearby guest turning to watch. Amara's face burned, but before she could respond, Malik's chair scraped back. He rose to his full height, his voice carrying the weight of thunder. "That's enough, mother." The room went still. Evelyn's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, and Darius's smirk disappeared. Malik turned to Amara, his green eyes fierce with something raw and protective. "Amara is my wife. She's more than any of you deserve, more than I deserve, and you will not speak to her that way, not now, not ever." He pulled her up with him, his hand firm in hers, and led her out of the restaurant, leaving Evelyn and Darius in stunned silence behind them. Outside, the harbor breeze was cool against Amara's heated cheeks. Malik stopped, turning to face her, his grip still strong as if he feared letting her go. His voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. "I'm sorry. They're vultures. You didn't deserve that." Amara's throat tightened. "You didn't have to defend me like that," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he said, stepping closer, his hand lifting to cup her face. "You're not just a deal, Amara. Not to me." The words hit her like a wave. She wanted to ask him about his illness, about the walls he kept building between them, but the tenderness in his touch silenced her questions. She leaned into his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart as she whispered, "I don't know what we're doing, Malik, but I'm scared. I think I'm falling for you." He didn't answer, but his arms tightened around her, his silence a mix of comfort and restraint, as though her confession had stirred something he wasn't ready to face. That night, back at the penthouse, Amara lay awake long after Malik had fallen asleep. She thought about Evelyn's cruel words, Darius's poison, and Malik's fierce defense. She thought about the warmth of his hand, the way his voice had softened when he told her she wasn't just a deal. Doubt still lingered, but so did something else, something stronger. Hope. Weeks passed in a blur of formal dinners, business meetings, and carefully measured appearances. But inside the penthouse, Amara's life began to shift in ways she had not expected. She moved through the sleek halls that once felt cold and distant, and slowly they began to feel like her space too. Malik was still guarded, his moods shifting like tides, but there were moments when his touch lingered too long, when his eyes softened in ways that contradicted his words. One morning, Amara stood in the bathroom, staring down at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Her breath caught, her heart racing as the reality settled in. She was pregnant, Malik's child. The heir that had started this arrangement was now real, alive inside her. A mixture of fear and joy swelled in her chest as she pressed a hand over her flat stomach. When she stepped into Malik's office later that day, he was seated behind his desk, papers scattered in front of him, his brow furrowed in concentration. She hesitated at the door, then walked in and placed the test gently on his desk. Malik's eyes froze on the object. For a heartbeat, he was silent. Then he rose to his feet so quickly the chair scraped back. His face broke into a smile that was raw, unguarded, and breathtaking. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Amara, we did it. You gave me everything I thought I'd never have." He kissed her forehead, his hands framing her face, his eyes shining with something deeper than joy, relief, fear, love tangled into one. For the first time, she saw Malik not as a man running from death, but as a man desperate for life. Yet as he held her, she caught the flicker of dread still lingering in his gaze. "You're happy," she said softly, searching his face. "But you're still scared, aren't you? About your illness?" His smile faltered, and the warmth in his eyes dimmed. "I'm fine," he said too quickly, his voice shutting the door on her question. "Let's focus on you, on the baby." The deflection stung. Amara nodded, letting the moment pass, but doubt pressed heavy on her chest. Darius's poison still echoed in her mind, whispering that she was nothing but a pawn, and Malik's silence about his condition only made the whispers louder. Days later, Amara sat in the waiting room of the private hospital where Malik had been diagnosed. He was in with Dr. Thompson while she waited, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. As she leaned back, she overheard two doctors speaking in low voices near the hall. "Harris is still pushing the degenerative narrative," one said, his tone skeptical. "But the scans don't add up. His symptoms look like stress, not terminal illness." Amara's heart stopped. She leaned closer, hidden by a plant. The second doctor lowered his voice. "Harris owes someone big. You think—" "It's the brother. Darius has been sniffing around." Her pulse thundered in her ears. She slipped out of the hospital unnoticed, her mind racing. Could it be true? Could Malik's diagnosis have been a lie? Could Darius have orchestrated everything to break his brother and steal the empire? That night she drove to a small clinic in Greenwich where she had found a doctor known for independence and discretion. Dr. Lena Carter reviewed Malik's medical records, which Amara had obtained through Keisha's quiet help. After careful study, Dr. Carter looked Amara in the eye and said firmly, "Your husband isn't dying. His scans were manipulated. His symptoms are consistent with chronic stress and exhaustion. Someone wanted him to believe he was dying." Amara's breath caught. Relief and rage crashed over her in equal measure. Malik wasn't dying. He wasn't running out of time. But Darius, her suspicion of him now burned like fire. He had planted poison at the wedding, at the luncheon, in Malik's ear for years. It was him. Driving back to Atlanta that night, Amara's hands gripped the wheel tightly. She touched her stomach, grounding herself in the life growing there, and made a decision. She would tell Malik the truth, but not tonight. Not until she had proof so strong that even Darius couldn't slip through it. When she returned to the penthouse, Malik was waiting. His tie loosened, his eyes soft but shadowed. "You're late," he said, crossing the room to brush her arm gently. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile, her heart racing with the weight of the truth she carried. "I just needed some air," she said steadily. He kissed her forehead and pulled her close. Amara leaned into his warmth, but her mind was already racing with plans. For Malik, for their child, and for the day she would expose Darius for the viper he truly was. The next morning, Amara sat across from Paul, Malik's trusted investigator, in a small cafe on the east side of Atlanta. She had convinced him to dig into Darius's dealings, promising to keep it between them. Her voice had been steady, but her hands trembled on the table as she waited. Paul finally slid an envelope across to her, his expression grave. Inside were bank statements, emails, and a recorded call. Amara's eyes widened as she read through the proof. Darius had paid Dr. Thompson to falsify Malik's scans. His voice crackled through the recorder, cold and casual as he told the doctor to make it convincing, to let Malik believe he was dying. Amara's chest burned with fury. Her suspicions were true. Malik's entire nightmare had been orchestrated by his own brother. By evening, she returned to the penthouse, the envelope clutched tightly in her hand. Malik was pacing in the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp as he argued with Keisha about a board vote. When he saw Amara, his eyes narrowed with concern. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Amara set the envelope on the coffee table, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. "We need to talk. It's about your diagnosis." Malik's brow furrowed. "What about it?" "It isn't real," she said firmly. "I had your records reviewed. Your symptoms are stress, not a terminal illness. Darius paid Dr. Thompson to lie to you. Malik froze, his face a storm of disbelief and fury. He grabbed the envelope, his eyes scanning the documents, his hands trembling as he listened to the recording. Darius's voice filled the room. Make it convincing, Harris. He needs to believe he's got no time left. Malik's jaw clenched, his breath ragged. No, he whispered, collapsing onto the sofa as the weight of the betrayal sank in. All this time I thought... His voice broke as he looked at Amara, his green eyes raw and devastated. I built my life around a lie. Amara knelt beside him, placing her hand on his. I'm so sorry. I had to know the truth. For you. For us. For the baby. Her other hand rested on her stomach, and Malik's eyes softened for a moment before darkening again. Before either of them could speak further, the penthouse doors burst open. Darius stormed in, his face twisted with rage. You little witch, he spat, his eyes burning into Amara. You couldn't leave it alone, could you? You had to dig into things that don't concern you. Amara rose to her feet, her voice sharp with fury. You tried to destroy your own brother for money and power. How could you? Darius laughed bitterly, his smile cruel. You think you've saved him? You're nothing but a pawn, Amara. A diner girl who got lucky. You've ruined everything. Before Amara could respond, Darius lunged at her, his hand swinging. She flinched as his fingers grazed her cheek, leaving a sharp sting. The moment froze in her mind, fear gripping her. But before she could even move, Malik roared with fury. He surged forward, seizing Darius by the collar and slamming him against the wall. His voice was deadly calm as he snarled, Touch her again, and you're done. You're nothing, Darius. A coward who would betray his own blood. Darius struggled, his smirk fading into desperation. You think you've won? You'll always be the weak one. Sick or not, you'll never outrun it. Malik's arm tightened protectively around Amara's waist as he shoved his brother toward the door. Get out. If I ever see you near my wife again, you'll wish you'd never been born. Darius stumbled back, his eyes darting between them, then fled, the door slamming behind him. Amara's breath shook, her cheek stinging, but Malik turned to her immediately. His touch was gentle as his fingers brushed her face, checking for the mark. He'll never touch you again, he vowed, his voice fierce and steady. No one will. I swear it, Amara. Tears filled her eyes, not from the pain, but from the depth of his protectiveness. I was so scared, she whispered, her voice breaking. Not of him, but of losing you. Of all of this being a lie. Malik pressed his forehead to hers, his voice raw. It's not a lie. You, the baby, us, it's real. More real than anything I've ever known. Her arms wrapped tightly around him as his words sank into her heart. The betrayal of Darius still burned, but in Malik's arms she felt a truth stronger than any poison. For the first time since their deal began, she realized they were no longer bound by a contract. They were bound by something far deeper. After the confrontation with Darius, the penthouse no longer felt like a fortress of steel and glass. It felt alive, charged with the bond between Malik and Amara. Days passed where Malik was quieter than usual, pacing by the windows late into the night. But whenever Amara entered the room, his eyes softened and his hand instinctively sought hers. The betrayal still weighed heavily on him, but it was her presence that steadied him, her laughter that chipped away at the darkness. One evening, Amara sat curled on the sofa, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her stomach. She watched Malik as he leaned against the window frame, staring out at the Atlanta skyline. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, his thoughts clearly far away. She rose and crossed the room, her bare feet silent against the polished floor, and slipped her arms around his waist from behind. You don't have to carry it alone, she whispered against his back. Malik turned, his eyes searching hers. I was ready to die, Amara. I believed it so completely that I gave up before I even had a chance to fight. And the worst part isn't that Darius lied to me. The worst part is that I let him. She placed her palm against his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart. You're alive, Malik. That's what matters. And you have something worth living for now. You have me. You have our baby. His breath caught, his hand lifting to cradle her face as though she were the most fragile thing in the world. "I don't deserve you," he murmured, his voice breaking. Amara's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "You don't get to decide that. I do. And I choose you, Malik. Not the billionaire, not the empire, just you." The walls around his heart finally cracked. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that left them both trembling. The kiss deepened, filled with every unspoken word, every fear, every desperate hope. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead against hers and whispered the words he had never dared to say. "I love you, Amara." The world seemed to stop. Her tears spilled freely as she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you too." Their embrace turned into something more, their bodies finding each other with the urgency of two souls finally free. Clothes fell away. Skin met skin, and their love was written in the heat of every touch, the devotion of every kiss. Malik worshipped her with a reverence that made her ache, his lips tracing paths that made her shiver. Amara's hands held him, close as though she could keep the darkness from ever touching him again. Later they lay tangled in the sheets, the city lights painting their skin in gold and silver. Malik rested his head against her stomach, his large hand spread protectively across the curve of her belly. "I can't believe this is real," he whispered. "You, me, our child. I thought I'd die alone, and instead I've been given everything." Amara stroked his hair, her heart full. "It's real, Malik, and no one can take it from us." But even as she spoke, she knew Darius wasn't finished. His greed and resentment ran too deep to let them rest, and when he struck again, he would strike harder. For now, though, Malik and Amara let themselves breathe in the fragile peace of their love, holding on to each other as if the world beyond those glass walls no longer existed. The weeks that followed were filled with a fragile happiness Malik and Amara had never known before. They prepared for the baby together, decorating a nursery in soft colors, laughing as they argued over names. Nia often visited the penthouse, her excitement about becoming an aunt lighting up her young face. For the first time, Amara felt the weight of survival lift from her shoulders. She wasn't just fighting to get through each day anymore. She was building a future. But beneath the surface, Malik remained wary. Darius had disappeared after the last confrontation, and his silence was dangerous. Malik knew his brother too. Well, he would not simply fade away. One stormy night, the threat arrived. Malik had just returned from a late meeting when he found Amara in the living room, her hand resting on her stomach as she hummed softly to herself. Relief swept through him at the sight, but it was cut short when the door to the penthouse burst open. Darius stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "You ruined me," Darius snarled, his voice thick with rage. "You took everything. It should have been mine, Malik. The hotels, the empire, all of it. But you always had to be the golden son." Malik stepped in front of Amara, his body a shield. "You did this to yourself, Darius. You betrayed me. You poisoned me with lies." Darius laughed bitterly, pulling a gun from his coat. "And I'll finish what I started. Once you're gone, no one will stand in my way." Amara's heart pounded as she clutched Malik's arm. Malik held her steady, his voice low and calm. "You don't want to do this, brother. Put it down." But Darius's hand trembled with desperation. He raised the gun, his eyes blazing. In that instant, Amara stepped forward, her voice firm and fearless. "If you want to kill him, you'll have to go through me, and our child." The words struck like lightning. For a moment, Darius faltered, his eyes flickering with something, guilt, regret, or perhaps the last shred of his humanity. That moment was enough. Security, alerted by the broken door, stormed in and wrestled the gun from his hand. Darius fought like a man possessed, screaming that it was his birthright. But in the end, he was dragged away, his voice echoing down the hallway until silence fell. Malik turned instantly, his hands cupping Amara's face, his eyes frantic. "You could have been killed. Why would you step in front of me like that?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Because I love you, because I won't let him take you from me. You're not alone anymore, Malik. You have me, you have us. His lips crashed against hers in a kiss that was desperate and filled with relief, his arms pulling her close as if he would never let her go again. When they broke apart, his voice was rough with emotion. I swear to you, Amara, I will spend the rest of my life protecting you and our child. You saved me from death, not just from Darius, but from the emptiness I lived in before you. Months later, the sound of a baby's cry filled the penthouse. Amara held their newborn daughter in her arms, tears of joy streaking her cheeks as Malik stood beside her, his eyes shining with pride and awe. He reached down, his large hand gently stroking the tiny curl of hair on his daughter's head. She's perfect, he whispered, his voice trembling. She's everything. Amara leaned against him, her heart full to bursting. We did this, Malik, together. He pressed a kiss to her temple, his green eyes filled with love. You gave me an heir, Amara. But more than that, you gave me life. You gave me love. The city of Atlanta glittered beyond the windows, but inside the penthouse a new world had been born. Malik and Amara Johnson were no longer bound by contracts, lies, or fear. They were bound by family, by trust, and by a love that had survived betrayal and darkness to shine brighter than ever. And as their daughter's tiny fingers curled around Malik's, he knew his legacy would not be measured in hotels or empires, but in the family he had finally found.